Get to the news. In spite of a tumultuous first year in office, the president has a list of solid accomplishments underneath his belt. For starters, his first big legislative win after the passage of the GOP tax bill. The Washington Examiner ticking off a host of his other accomplishments, which include getting a highly respected conservative judge confirmed to the Supreme Court in Neil Gorsuch, appointing a one-year record number of judges to the circuit courts, scrapping a host of burdensome and unnecessary regulations, he says, playing a big role in the fight which essentially helped destroy the Islamic State savages, and approving pipeline projects and securing new oil drilling. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders recently touted the president's first-year successes, saying they're not getting the attention they deserve.
The president has been a tremendous leader when it comes to growing our economy, creating jobs, creating optimism in our country, and putting America first again. This is something this president talked about on the campaign trail, and he is delivering. I think the fact that he has been defeating and helping lead that effort to defeat ISIS is a major success story that's been completely missed and completely underreported by most of the mainstream media over the last year.
And when it comes to the economy, a big measure is the Dow Jones. And it has soared, certainly hitting record after record during the president's first year. David, your thoughts?
President Trump and the Republican Congress have delivered on what we talked about last year, which was making people more economically and personally secure. And this first year, just as important, now sets the table and sets the platform for next year. We're going to look at welfare reform. We're going to look at an infrastructure bill, all which will make the 2018 political environment very different than what we have talked about this year, and will make for some interesting elections.
Just a quick follow to you. So as we are ending the year, we're seeing historic lows in the popularity numbers for this president, historic for the United States of America for a first-term president. Yet he's getting these things done. You hear Sarah Sanders saying he's not getting the credit for them. What are your thoughts on those low numbers?
They have lots to do to go up, but these policies will help do that. And let's also keep in mind, just because an elected official isn't necessarily popular doesn't mean people don't support their policies, and doesn't ultimately mean they get reelected, because people will judge them on how their lives are better. And in this case, this first year, we're heading in that direction.
Jessica?
I respectfully disagree, but you knew that was going to happen. Maybe not the respectful part. I think that the low approval numbers do have to do with the president and these policies. There's a reason that Democrats are up 13 to 15 points in the generic ballot, that everyone is expecting a wave election, which just historically happens in a cyclical way. But I don't see it that way. And the president also promised a bunch of things that are not happening, like the wall. He didn't get health care done or repeal and replace, though removing the individual mandate is certainly a step towards that, which some people would think is a good thing. I personally don't. But it was interesting because when I saw those lists of accomplishments, I actually was saying to Kat, I was like, oh, I didn't really realize all this was happening, because there have been so many controversies, like the Charlottesville remarks or the sons of whatever comment that he made about NFL players that people, I believe, have focused on. So I can see why a conservative would be happy looking at that list.
You know, another thing, and I mean, you've listed a couple things that were played out on Twitter or wherever we happen to see them that became bigger perhaps than anybody had anticipated. But, you know, Kat, Sanders has a good point when she talks about the coverage of the good things from the administration, because when you look at some of the surveys that were done earlier and all the way through the end here of 2017, there's been so much negative coverage of this White House.
Right, absolutely. And there is some of that, to your point, that he does bring on himself a little bit. He likes to fight. He doesn't care if he does things the way that people think that he should do in that office. However, some of the negative coverage is ridiculous when you're talking about things like the number of Diet Cokes that he drinks per day, and is that having an effect on his mental health?
The extra scoop of
the
ice
extra
cream.
scoop of ice cream. Does he eat at McDonald's? Who cares? I eat at McDonald's. I drink Diet Coke, and I think that most people kind of do that
I
sometimes.
put Diet Coke on my ice cream at McDonald's.
Yeah. People relate to the president because he likes KFC. He likes regular, everyday people things. So on that level, they do like him. But back to David's point, it is true that they don't have to personally like Donald Trump to like his policies. President Obama, for example, is very popular personally. Many of his policies are not popular, which is why we've seen a referendum over the last year on a number of his policies. And in terms of the media coverage, the reason why they choose to seize on controversies rather than digging deep and doing the work to cover judicial nominations, to cover the ins and outs of the tax bill, is because it's easy. They're trying to protect President Obama's legacy by making sure that they seize on the controversies rather than promoting the accomplishments of the administration.
You know what's also interesting about what you're saying, Katie, is that if you'll recall, Democrats finally in the end, just before Barack Obama was exiting the White House, were saying they may have underestimated the polling which showed how upset people were about Obamacare, how it wasn't working. And that was kind of a shortcoming as he was exiting out the door. David, you're nodding.
I had to chuckle when Jessica said that while he didn't get all these other things done, as if everything he talked about in the campaign had to be done in the first year. Which
well, he said it was a
day
one situation with health care.
Well, it was a day one priority. It was a day one priority. We just saw
he said it was going to be done, though.
Submit the 8 project ideas. I mean, so that this is in process. We'll see what happens in early 18.
Any president would be pleased to have a first year like President Trump has just pulled off. Let me also add, it's interesting that, that's where partly there's a disconnect with national Democratic leaders. They're suggesting that somehow getting rid of the individual mandate, which is somehow going to make people who have to pay a government penalty for an insurance plan they can't pay for
technically
because...
a tax.
Technically a tax, that somehow they think voters are going to be angry at the GOP because now they don't have to pay a tax for
But it's not just that. It's over $300 billion lost to the economy over the next 10 years. We also could talk about on the health care front the children's insurance program, which hasn't been funded, and a number of states are going to be losing. And that's something Republicans and Democrats should be concerned about. With the individual mandate, right now Obamacare has a plus 21% approval rating. I mean, it was, as you say, as Obama was leaving, it was not popular. But today, under threat of what the GOP would do,
or just
it is
mystery.
popular.
I think
you think it's just mysterious?
But explain how it's acceptable for people to have to pay a penalty for a health care plan they can't pay for because it's too expensive because the insurance companies have all pulled out of their state and they have potentially just one insurer in their state.
They're forced to buy something that they wouldn't voluntarily purchase on their own. And then on top of it, it's too expensive. So they either pay the penalty, which is now up to hundreds of dollars, or they're forced into an Obamacare plan that changes year after year, and they get taken off the plan, and their benefits change, and their doctors go away.
Because they can't keep
the
their
hospitals
doctor.
in rural areas have now collapsed. We don't have that network anymore.
There hasn't really been a president that's been able to do everything that they say they're going to do. I think that we're all unfortunately used to the fact that that's how politics works. Sometimes they say something, and it ends up not actually working out that way.
Kat, I want to get you in on this point because I don't hear it enough. I was looking at pictures just this morning because, sometimes on holidays you'll kind of look back. I was heartbroken still. I have relatives down in Texas who are not in the Houston area, but were part of some of the efforts to get goods there for people. People are still hurting. This is a president who went down, who was very visible there, Florida, Puerto Rico. And I know he took a lot of grief on that, but he spent some time on that island as well this year. I was with the special counsel to the president, Kellyanne Conway, on the air the day that he was in Puerto Rico. We talked about that. Florida, the Keys, still a mess. I mean, so much happened in rapid succession in his presidency during the hurricane season. No one really talks about that.
Right. Plus, he's dealing with investigation. He's dealing with a lot of people who don't consider him to be a legitimate president. He had maybe the hardest year as a president that he could possibly have, whether some of it's his fault, some of it isn't. I think some of it is. But nature certainly isn't, and a lot of things certainly aren't. And if I were in his position, I'd probably be doing a lot worse than eating McDonald's to deal with it. So.
But based on the pace of the year that we've had, the White House hasn't been so concerned about PR. I mean, the first 3-4 months of the staffing in the West Wing and what was going on, it was chaotic until John Kelly came in.
I think it was longer than 3 months.
4 or 5 months, 6 months, right? But they did finally get a handle on it at the 6-month mark over the summer, and they really have had a lot of accomplishment that accomplishments that have been severely downplayed. I mean, we are hardly talking about the fact that ISIS is now removed from Iraq, which is a huge deal considering they were marching across the territories, slaughtering Christians, engaging in genocide, destroying artifacts and things that have been there for thousands of years. That is now over, and we obviously have to continue dealing with them here. But that was a huge concern of Americans just a year ago, and they're still in America. Their investigation's open. However, the fact that that is now an accomplishment on the list that's being downplayed should be highlighted.
Well, ISIS had grown to 14 countries. We were able to get in there with Raqqa and get rid of their nesting hole where they were. But they're still in many other areas. As you point out, we have a better shot now at really going after them.